Audiobook, give me time and I'll evolve your communication skills. Prologue. Communication is the invisible bridge that unites souls, the whisper that weaves connections in the darkness of everyday life. It allows us to share ideas like someone giving a secret to the wind, express emotions that burn in our hearts, and build relationships that sometimes become refuges or labyrinths. However, there are those who feel that words slip through their fingers, like cold sand. Sentences that get stuck in the throat, thoughts that founder before reaching the shore of dialogue. Anxiety, that silent shadow, drags itself between the unspoken syllables. One of the greatest deceptions is to believe that communication is an innate gift, a talent reserved for a select few. The truth is more subtle. It's an art cultivated with patience and awareness. It's not about embellishing language with fancy words or erecting oneself on a pedestal of superiority. True power lies in understanding what brings us closer to or distances us from others. The barriers that hinder this flow can be internal, fears that nest in the mind, or external, such as the indifference of the listener or the chaos of the environment. The first obstacle lies not in the language, but in the psyche. There are blocks that chain words before they can be released. Fear of judgment. Many remain silent for fear of being dissected by the eyes of others. They believe every word will be weighty, every silence interpreted. But the reality is both crueler and more beautiful. Most are too busy listening to the echo of their own inner voices to judge yours. The antidote is not perfection, but authenticity. Focus not on how others perceive you, but on the message you want to convey. Clarity and honesty are beacons in the fog of anxiety. Uncertainty about ideas. Will this be relevant? Will it sound trivial? These doubts are daggers that cut off expression. But every perspective has value. What is obvious to one person may be a flash of insight to another. Speaking with conviction doesn't require absolute certainty, but rather the courage to share a fragment of your inner world. Self-absorption. When the mind becomes obsessed with questions like, am I sounding intelligent? Or, am I making a mistake? The conversation becomes an anxious monologue. The trick is to shift gears, stop looking at yourself and observe the other person. Are they understanding? Is there interest in their eyes? Or maybe they're just waiting for their turn to speak. True communication is born when the focus shifts from I to you. Not all battles are fought within. Sometimes, the environment conspires against dialogue. Noise and distractions, a room filled with sounds, abrupt interruptions, or screens that steal your attention can turn a conversation into a disaster. If the message matters, seek a haven of silence. Let nothing come between the words and the person receiving them. Emotional disconnection. There are conversations that slip away without a trace, like rain on glass. It happens when words travel from the mouth to the air, but not to the heart. To avoid this, we must build bridges, questions that probe, gazes that sustain, gestures that say, I'm listening, without the need for a voice. Empathy is the magnet that attracts scattered souls. The art of reinventing dialogue. Less perfection, more truth. Words don't need to be polished like gems. Sometimes the simplest phrases are the ones that resonate most powerfully. Speak from experience, not from a mask. From I to you, a conversation isn't a disguised monologue. Make the other person feel seen. Ask questions. Adapt your message to their reactions. Pauses, gestures, silences, everything is language. Listen, don't just hear. Most people wait their turn to speak, not to understand. Active listening is an act of courage, silencing the internal noise to make room for the other person. Repeat in your own words what you think you've understood. You'll see how the dialogue transforms. Section 1. Speaking is, without a doubt, one of the most powerful tools we have for communicating. However, it's the art of listening that truly determines the quality of our human interactions. When genuine listening is lacking, conversations are reduced to superficial exchanges in which each person waits for their turn to speak, without truly paying attention to the other. Effective listening isn't a passive act, as is often believed. It requires effort, concentration, and, above all, a genuine interest in what the other person has to say. Often, what appears to be a problem with expression is actually a problem with listening. When a person feels they're not being heard, they tend to become frustrated, emotionally disconnect, and, over time, stop trying to communicate clearly. This ability to listen deeply influences every aspect of life, from our personal relationships to the workplace, including leadership and conflict resolution. People who develop conscious listening skills not only gain a better understanding of others, but are also able to persuade more effectively, resolve conflicts more harmoniously, and create an atmosphere of trust in any interaction. Unfortunately, many fall into the trap of poor listening. They think they're paying attention, when in reality they're just waiting for their opportunity to intervene. In this type of dialogue, the focus is not on understanding the other person, but on preparing the next response. One of the most common mistakes is interrupting the person speaking, whether to comment on something, offer a solution, or simply express an opinion, without waiting for the other person to finish. This practice disrupts the natural flow of the conversation and makes the other person feel ignored or undervalued. Another common difficulty is distraction. The mind easily wanders to personal concerns, unrelated thoughts, or external stimuli such as cell phones. When this happens, relevant information is missed and communication loses depth. Furthermore, many people listen selectively, paying attention only to what they find interesting or relevant to themselves. This biased listening limits the true understanding of the message and can lead to misunderstandings. It's important to understand the difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is a passive process. Sounds reach our ears without any conscious effort. Listening, on the other hand, involves interpreting, analyzing, and understanding what the other person is saying. Active listening requires total presence in the conversation, a mind focused on the other person's words, and an attitude of genuine curiosity. To achieve this, it's vital to minimize distractions, ask relevant questions, and demonstrate genuine interest in what is being shared. When you listen mindfully, you capture not only the words but also the emotions behind them. The tone of voice, the pace of speaking, and the silences between sentences can reveal much more than what is explicitly said. To cultivate effective listening, it's helpful to adopt a mindset of openness and curiosity. Instead of rushing to respond, take a moment to process and reflect on what you've heard. Eye contact, for example, is a powerful tool. Looking at the speaker demonstrates attention and creates a sense of emotional connection. Similarly, body language plays an important role. Nodding your head, leaning slightly forward, and maintaining an open posture are nonverbal cues that indicate genuine engagement in the conversation. Open-ended questions are especially useful, as they invite the other person to delve deeper into your message and allow you to better understand their perspective. It's also advisable to ask for details or clarification if something isn't clear. Paraphrasing what you've understood, using your own words, is a valuable technique for confirming that the message has been correctly understood. This not only avoids confusion but also gives the other person the feeling of having been truly heard. Being heard is one of the most rewarding experiences for any human being. When someone feels their voice is valued, the interpersonal bond is strengthened and trust is born. Often, people don't look for immediate solutions to their problems. What they really need is to feel understood. Offering a space where they can express themselves without interruption can be more healing than any well-intentioned advice. When active listening is practiced, conversations flow naturally, people feel more comfortable sharing their thoughts and emotions, and communication becomes richer and more effective. Silence, for its part, plays a fundamental role in listening. Far from being uncomfortable, silence, when used properly, allows us to process what we've heard and gives the other person the opportunity to reflect before continuing. Often, the impulse to fill in the blanks with words disrupts the natural rhythm of conversation. Learning to feel comfortable in these silent spaces allows communication to reach a more authentic depth. Silence can even be a sign of empathy. When someone shares an intense emotion, a silent pause can communicate more support and respect than any hasty comment. However, there are also emotional obstacles that make good listening difficult. Intense emotions, for example, can cloud our attention span. If the conversation touches on a sensitive topic, it's common to react impulsively instead of pausing to listen clearly. Impatience is another great enemy. Wanting the other person to finish quickly so we can speak prevents a deep understanding of their point of view. Likewise, prejudices or rigid positions tend to distort the message, and ego, when we prioritize being right over understanding the other person, turns the conversation into a fight, not a meaningful exchange. Applying active listening in everyday life has concrete benefits. In the workplace, it improves collaboration between teams, facilitates problem solving, and strengthens leadership. A good leader isn't the one who talks the most, but rather someone who knows how to listen to their team's needs and respond with sensitivity and clarity. In personal relationships, attentive listening prevents unnecessary conflicts and nurtures bonds of trust. When both parties feel understood, communication flows more naturally and harmoniously. In negotiation contexts, listening attentively allows you to detect the other party's true interests and find mutually beneficial solutions. People who are good at listening tend to be more persuasive, as they adapt their message to what the other person truly needs or expects. Finally, evaluating and improving our own listening is a valuable exercise. Reflecting on our communication habits, asking ourselves if we interrupt frequently, are easily distracted, or respond without fully understanding, helps us identify areas for improvement. Asking those close to us for feedback can also offer a very useful outside perspective. Asking if they feel heard in our conversations can reveal aspects of our communication we hadn't noticed. Truly listening isn't something we take for granted. It's a conscious practice, a daily choice that transforms how we relate to the world. Section 2. Speaking is, without a doubt, one of the most powerful tools we have for communicating. However, it's the art of listening that truly determines the quality of our human interactions. When genuine listening is lacking, conversations are reduced to superficial exchanges in which each person waits for their turn to speak, without truly paying attention to the other. Effective listening isn't a passive act, as is often believed. It requires effort, concentration, and, above all, a genuine interest in what the other person has to say. Often, what appears to be a problem with expression is actually a problem with listening. When a person feels they're not being heard, they tend to become frustrated, emotionally disconnect, and, over time, stop trying to communicate clearly. This ability to listen deeply influences every aspect of life, from our personal relationships to the workplace, including leadership and conflict resolution. People who develop conscious listening skills not only gain a better understanding of others, but are also able to persuade more effectively, resolve conflicts more harmoniously, and create an atmosphere of trust in any interaction. Unfortunately, many fall into the trap of poor listening. They think they're paying attention, when in reality they're just waiting for their opportunity to intervene. In this type of dialogue, the focus is not on understanding the other person, but on preparing the next response. One of the most common mistakes is interrupting the person speaking, whether to comment on something, offer a solution, or simply express an opinion, without waiting for the other person to finish. This practice disrupts the natural flow of the conversation and makes the other person feel ignored or undervalued. Another common difficulty is distraction. The mind easily wanders to personal concerns, unrelated thoughts, or external stimuli such as cell phones. When this happens, relevant information is missed and communication loses depth. Furthermore, many people listen selectively, paying attention only to what they find interesting or relevant to themselves. This biased listening limits the true understanding of the message and can lead to misunderstandings. It's important to understand the difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is a passive process. Sounds reach our ears without any conscious effort. Listening, on the other hand, involves interpreting, analyzing, and understanding what the other person is saying. Active listening requires total presence in the conversation, a mind focused on the other person's words, and an attitude of genuine curiosity. To achieve this, it's vital to minimize distractions, ask relevant questions, and demonstrate genuine interest in what is being shared. When you listen mindfully, you capture not only the words but also the emotions behind them. The tone of voice, the pace of speaking, and the silences between sentences can reveal much more than what is explicitly said. To cultivate effective listening, it's helpful to adopt a mindset of openness and curiosity. Instead of rushing to respond, take a moment to process and reflect on what you've heard. Eye contact, for example, is a powerful tool. Looking at the speaker demonstrates attention and creates a sense of emotional connection. Similarly, body language plays an important role. Nodding your head, leaning slightly forward, and maintaining an open posture are nonverbal cues that indicate genuine engagement in the conversation. Open-ended questions are especially useful, as they invite the other person to delve deeper into your message and allow you to better understand their perspective. It's also advisable to ask for details or clarification if something isn't clear. Paraphrasing what you've understood, using your own words, is a valuable technique for confirming that the message has been correctly understood. This not only avoids confusion but also gives the other person the feeling of having been truly heard. Being heard is one of the most rewarding experiences for any human being. When someone feels their voice is valued, the interpersonal bond is strengthened and trust is born. Often, people don't look for immediate solutions to their problems. What they really need is to feel understood. Offering a space where they can express themselves without interruption can be more healing than any well-intentioned advice. When active listening is practiced, conversations flow naturally, people feel more comfortable sharing their thoughts and emotions, and communication becomes richer and more effective. Silence, for its part, plays a fundamental role in listening. Far from being uncomfortable, silence, when used properly, allows us to process what we've heard and gives the other person the opportunity to reflect before continuing. Often, the impulse to fill in the blanks with words disrupts the natural rhythm of conversation. Learning to feel comfortable in these silent spaces allows communication to reach a more authentic depth. Silence can even be a sign of empathy. When someone shares an intense emotion, a silent pause can communicate more support and respect than any hasty comment. However, there are also emotional obstacles that make good listening difficult. Intense emotions, for example, can cloud our attention span. If the conversation touches on a sensitive topic, it's common to react impulsively instead of pausing to listen clearly. Impatience is another great enemy. Wanting the other person to finish quickly so we can speak prevents a deep understanding of their point of view. Likewise, prejudices or rigid positions tend to distort the message, and ego, when we prioritize being right over understanding the other person, turns the conversation into a fight, not a meaningful exchange. Applying active listening in everyday life has concrete benefits. In the workplace, it improves collaboration between teams, facilitates problem solving, and strengthens leadership. A good leader isn't the one who talks the most, but rather someone who knows how to listen to their team's needs and respond with sensitivity and clarity. In personal relationships, attentive listening prevents unnecessary conflicts and nurtures bonds of trust. When both parties feel understood, communication flows more naturally and harmoniously. In negotiation contexts, listening attentively allows you to detect the other party's true interests and find mutually beneficial solutions. People who are good at listening tend to be more persuasive, as they adapt their message to what the other person truly needs or expects. Finally, evaluating and improving our own listening is a valuable exercise. Reflecting on our communication habits, asking ourselves if we interrupt frequently, are easily distracted, or respond without fully understanding, helps us identify areas for improvement. Asking those close to us for feedback can also offer a very useful outside perspective. Asking if they feel heard in our conversations can reveal aspects of our communication we hadn't noticed. Truly listening isn't something we take for granted, it's a conscious practice, a daily choice that transforms how we relate to the world. Section 3. Empathy, the heart of effective communication. In the art of communication, we often think that doing it well consists solely of speaking clearly or listening attentively. However, the true essence of effective communication goes much further. It lies in the ability to understand others on a deeper, more human level. In this context, empathy becomes a powerful and transformative tool. Empathy is the ability to put yourself, even for a moment, in another person's shoes. It means trying to see the world from their perspective, feeling a fraction of what they're experiencing, and recognizing the validity of their emotions and thoughts. It doesn't necessarily mean agreeing with everything the other person says, but rather opening a space for understanding and emotional acceptance. Often, our daily conversations become fields of tension because each person is too focused on their own perspective. Instead of trying to understand the other, we try to convince, correct, or impose our point of view. This creates barriers that hinder connection and cause frustration for both parties. When empathy ceases to be an exception and becomes a constant practice, communication changes radically. Conversations cease to be battles of arguments and become opportunities to build mutual understanding and strengthen bonds. Common obstacles to empathy. Although many people consider themselves empathetic, in practice, barriers often arise that limit this ability. One of the main obstacles is hasty judgment. Often, before the other person finishes speaking, we have already jumped to conclusions or formed an opinion about what they are saying. This habit prevents us from understanding the real message and leads us to respond based on assumptions, not facts. Another common barrier is the tendency to minimize the other person's feelings. Expressions like, "It's not that big a deal," "You should be stronger," or "You're overreacting," may seem harmless, but they actually diminish the other person's emotional experience, closing the door to honest dialogue. Ego can also hinder empathy. We often listen not to understand, but to respond, to be right, or to prove our point. In an empathetic conversation, the priority is not winning, but understanding. Lack of presence is another determining factor. When we're distracted by other people's thoughts or our cell phones while someone is talking to us, communication loses depth. True connection only occurs when we are fully present, when we give the other person our full attention. How to develop empathic communication. Empathy isn't necessarily a quality you're born with, it's a skill that can be cultivated with practice and awareness. The first step to achieving empathetic communication is listening with intention. This involves letting go of the impulse to respond immediately and focusing on genuinely understanding what the other person is saying. Showing understanding through verbal and nonverbal communication is also essential. Phrases like, "I understand what you're saying," "It seems like this was a difficult experience for you," or "I can imagine how you felt," help the other person feel validated. At the same time, your tone of voice, facial expression, and body language should reflect interest, openness, and respect. Gestures like crossing your arms, avoiding eye contact, or responding coldly can convey indifference, even if the words used are appropriate. Asking open-ended questions allows you to explore the other person's emotional world more deeply. Questions like, what was it like for you to experience that situation? What impacted you the most? Or, how would you like to handle this? Demonstrate a genuine interest in understanding. It's also important to avoid offering unsolicited solutions. Often, the person speaking isn't looking for an immediate response or advice, but simply to be heard and understood. Interrupting to fix the situation can give the impression that their emotions aren't being taken seriously. Empathy in difficult conversations. Conflicts and disagreements are inevitable in any relationship, but how they are handled determines whether they strengthen or weaken the bond. In tense situations, it's common to cling to one's own position, neglecting the other person's point of view. However, an empathetic response can transform an argument into an opportunity for rapprochement. Instead of reacting defensively, it's helpful to pause and ask yourself, what is this person feeling? Or even ask questions like, what are you really worried about in this situation? Or, what did you expect to happen? These questions open the door to a more constructive conversation. Accepting that others have the right to feel what they feel, even if we don't share their perspective, is a sign of profound respect. Validating their emotions doesn't mean giving in or abandoning our point of view, but rather recognizing that their experiences are also legitimate. When both parties feel heard and understood, the conflict is diffused and mutually beneficial solutions can be found. Empathy in leadership and persuasion. In the professional world, empathy is considered one of the most valuable skills for leaders and communicators. An empathetic leader, who takes the time to understand the concerns and needs of their team, fosters trust, commitment, and a collaborative environment. In persuasion contexts, such as sales or negotiations, empathy makes a crucial difference. Actively listening to the customer, understanding their real needs, and tailoring the message based on these concerns creates a stronger and more effective connection than simply listing a product's features. In presentations or speeches, connecting emotionally with the audience is key. A speaker who demonstrates understanding of their audience's problems and aspirations creates a much more lasting impact than one who simply conveys information. Exercises to strengthen empathy. Making empathy a daily habit requires conscious practice. A useful exercise is to summarize what the other person has said before responding. This not only helps confirm that you have understood, but also conveys to the other person that they have been heard. Another effective exercise is to imagine how we would feel if we were in someone else's shoes. Asking ourselves, how would I react if that happened to me, allows us to broaden our emotional understanding. During a conversation, paying attention to the other person's nonverbal language, their face, their posture, their tone of voice, can reveal emotions that go unspoken. Likewise, making the effort not to interrupt and emotionally validate others in every daily interaction is a powerful and transformative practice. The impact of empathy on relationships. Human relationships, whether romantic, family, friendship, or work, are strengthened when both parties feel understood. A lack of empathy is one of the main reasons why many relationships deteriorate over time. When a person perceives that another truly understands them, trust and connection deepen. In conflict situations, empathy allows us to find common ground and build solutions where everyone feels respected. But its reach goes further. It also helps us understand ourselves. Recognizing and validating our own emotions fosters greater emotional intelligence. Section 4. In the vast fabric of human relationships, trust stands as the fundamental foundation upon which all authentic communication rests. Without this fragile but powerful element, words become empty echoes, and messages lose their ability to resonate in the soul of the interlocutor. True trust is not limited to the mere credibility of our statements. It is an invisible bridge that conveys security, authenticity, and a deep human connection in every exchange, whether in the intimacy of a personal conversation, in the dynamics of a business meeting, or before an audience at a public presentation. Those who inspire trust possess an invaluable gift, the ability to forge meaningful connections and exert influence without artifice. Conversely, when someone casts doubt on their authenticity, their words hit a wall of skepticism, if not outright ignored or rejected. Building this communicative trust doesn't depend on fancy words or empty persuasion techniques, but on the harmony between our words and actions, the honesty that permeates every expression, and the ability to create spaces where emotional safety reigns. This precious trust doesn't spring up instantly like a spring, but is built brick by brick through attitudes and behaviors that reinforce our credibility day after day. Several pillars support this construction: the sacred coherence between what we proclaim and what we practice, because nothing erodes trust faster than contradiction; transparent honesty that rejects half-truths and manipulations, even if it sometimes forces us to reveal our vulnerabilities; the art of listening with genuine interest, making others feel valued; empathy that recognizes and honors the emotions of others; and the serene confidence we project through congruent body language and clear speech. However, even though it's built with patience, trust can crumble in an instant when faced with certain errors: persistent inconsistency, a habit of interrupting others, deliberately withholding information, a mismatch between gestures and words, or a refusal to acknowledge our own mistakes. Each of these behaviors acts like a hammer blow against the fragile crystals of credibility. Fortunately, there are ways to strengthen this essential bond: crystal clear message, avoiding ambiguity and vagueness, conscious attention to our nonverbal language, that upright posture, that open gaze, those measured gestures, rigorously fulfilling our promises, no matter how small, the courage to show vulnerability without losing strength, and respectful recognition of others' emotions and perspectives. The fruits of this trust-based communication are evident in all areas of life: in personal relationships, where it allows for judgment-free intimacy; in the workplace, where it transforms teams into collaborative communities; in negotiations, where it opens doors that mere rhetoric cannot break down; and especially in leadership, where actions are the key, not the means. To cultivate this skill, we can practice transformative exercises, carefully preparing our important interventions, practicing active listening in everyday conversations, polishing our body language in front of the mirror, soliciting honest feedback from those close to us, and above all, having the courage to acknowledge our mistakes promptly and humbly. At the end of the journey, we understand that building trust through communication is not a rhetorical trick, but an art that requires time, authenticity, and unwavering consistency between what is said and what is done. Those who master this art not only enrich their relationships but also discover that words, when backed by integrity, have the power to move mountains, build bridges between souls, and create opportunities where there were once only walls. In this delicate balance between honesty and tact, between strength and vulnerability, lies the essence of a communication that not only informs, but transforms. Section 5. The true power of persuasion. The beginning of true personal growth begins when we understand the value of persuasion as an essential life skill. Few skills are as powerful as the ability to positively influence others, yet it's surprisingly rarely taught effectively. When we hear the word persuasion, we often associate it with dubious tricks, deceptive tactics, or strategies to manipulate others' will. But this perception is far from its true meaning. Persuasion, in its noblest essence, is not about manipulation or coercion, but about guidance. It is based on getting people to make decisions that benefit both parties, while always maintaining integrity and mutual respect. It is an act of deep connection, where trust and understanding of the other's needs are fundamental. Ethical persuasion has applications that go far beyond the professional sphere. It's useful in our personal relationships, in sales, in negotiations, and in any situation where we want to generate positive change without resorting to pressure or deception. This chapter focuses precisely on how to develop authentic, respectful, and effective persuasion. 1. Persuasion is not manipulation. One of the most important concepts we must be clear about from the outset is that persuasion is not the same as manipulation. Manipulation involves influencing another person's decisions in such a way that they feel they have no options or their will is restricted. In contrast, ethical persuasion is based on inspiration. It involves creating a space where the other party can clearly see their options and make informed decisions that benefit them, while also considering our well-being. When we persuade without manipulating, we focus on transparency. We don't hide information or force others to decide against their interests. We seek mutual benefit, building win-win solutions. And, above all, we respect free will, allowing others to make their own decisions without pressure, recognizing their right to choose freely. 2. The psychology of persuasion. To persuade effectively, it's essential to understand how the human mind works. Persuasion is deeply connected to our emotions, desires, fears, and basic needs. Understanding these factors allows us to sensitively guide people toward beneficial decisions, without having to force them. 2.1 The role of emotions. Although we often believe our decisions are based on logic and facts, the truth is that emotions play a fundamental role. Feelings such as fear, joy, surprise, or satisfaction powerfully influence our choices. For example, a person may decide to buy a car not only based on its performance, but also on how they imagine driving it, the feeling of freedom, security, or status that the idea evokes. The best way to connect emotionally with someone is through stories. Narratives appeal to the heart, allowing listeners to see themselves reflected in a situation and experience, even if only in an imaginary way, the benefits of the proposal. 2.2 The principle of reciprocity. One of the most powerful foundations of persuasion is the principle of reciprocity. When someone receives something unsolicited, they tend to want to return the gesture. This dynamic can be applied ethically in multiple contexts. For example, if we offer genuine help to a colleague, that person is very likely to be willing to collaborate with us in the future. This creates bonds of trust, which are key to any persuasion process. 2.3 The value of scarcity. Another relevant psychological principle is that of scarcity. People tend to value more what they perceive as limited or exclusive. This perception can drive quick decisions, such as taking advantage of a special, time-limited offer. However, scarcity must be used honestly. Using it as a deceptive tactic can damage trust. When communicated truthfully, it can generate a sense of urgency that motivates action without resorting to pressure. 3. Ethical strategies of persuasion. There are various strategies that allow you to persuade without resorting to manipulation. Below, we explore some of the most effective. 3.1 Formulate open questions. Open-ended questions invite reflection and encourage dialogue. Rather than imposing ideas, they encourage collaborative exploration. For example, if we want a colleague to support an initiative, we could ask, "What do you think about optimizing this process?" Or, "How do you think this approach would benefit the team?" This makes the other person feel involved and in control, which facilitates their willingness to collaborate. 3.2 The power of narratives. Stories don't just entertain, they also persuade. They're much more effective than cold fact-telling, as they connect with the listener's emotional side. A well-told story conveys credibility, empathy, and meaning. It also helps visualize the benefits of a proposal in a clear and experiential way. 3.3 Build authority and credibility. Authentic authority is earned over time, through experience, consistency, and knowledge. People tend to trust those who demonstrate competence and sincerity. It's not about imposing, but rather inspiring respect through transparency and preparation. Being a trusted source of information transforms our suggestions into valuable recommendations. 3.4 Promote a sense of belonging. Humans have a deep need to feel part of something bigger. When people perceive they can integrate into a community, a cause, or a group with shared values, their motivation to join increases. In a sales context, for example, it's not just a product that's being offered, it's being part of an experience or a lifestyle. This sense of belonging can be a very powerful driver of persuasion. 4. Persuade without generating resistance. One of the biggest challenges in persuasion is avoiding making the other person feel attacked or pressured. The key is to present ideas as proposals open to discussion, not as impositions. 4.1. Avoid direct confrontation. Confrontation or harsh criticism often triggers defensiveness. Instead, it's better to present our ideas as possible and beneficial options. For example, instead of saying, "You're wrong," we can say, "Have you considered this other approach that might help us both?" This keeps the conversation open and respectful. 4.2. Validate the other's perspective. Before expressing our point of view, it's essential to acknowledge and value the other person's ideas. This not only reduces resistance but also demonstrates empathy and a willingness to understand. Phrases like, "I understand why you feel that way, and I think it's a valid point," can open the door to a more constructive and less confrontational conversation. 5. Persuasion in real life. Persuasion isn't limited to a boardroom or a business negotiation. It's present in almost all of our daily interactions. Let's look at some examples. 5.1. In a negotiation. Let's imagine we're in the middle of a negotiation and want to reach a mutually beneficial agreement. Instead of adopting a confrontational stance, we can ask, "What's most important to you in this agreement?" This question opens a space for dialogue and collaboration, rather than establishing a competitive environment. 5.2. In a public presentation. When presenting an idea to a group, connecting emotionally with the audience is crucial. Stories, once again, are powerful tools. They help capture attention, awaken empathy, and generate identification. Furthermore, minding our body language, tone of voice, and confidence when speaking can reinforce our credibility and facilitate acceptance of the message. Section 6. High-stakes conversations are those in which the atmosphere becomes dense, charged with tension, and emotions run high. They are characterized by their ability to transform realities, to alter the course of important decisions. In them, every word can carry crucial weight, as the stakes are significant. Relationships, opportunities, trust, or even one's personal and professional future. These conversations can arise in contexts as varied as a business negotiation, a difficult conversation with a loved one, a crucial job interview, a delicate work situation, or when delivering news that could change someone's day, or even their life. In such scenarios, the way we communicate is crucial. Good conversation management can pave the way for understanding and agreement. Poor communication, on the other hand, can lead to misunderstandings, breakups, or damaging decisions. The ability to handle difficult conversations isn't just a useful tool, it's a key skill for personal and professional success. One trait that distinguishes effective leaders from those who merely hold a position is precisely this ability, remaining calm under pressure, communicating clearly, and managing both their own emotions and those of others. No matter how solid our arguments are or how much information we have, if we are unable to master the emotional component of the exchange, our chances of positive influence are considerably diminished. This chapter explores how to successfully conduct high-stakes conversations, providing tools and strategies that enable you to act calmly, think clearly, and achieve solutions that benefit all parties involved. 1. The nature of high-risk conversations. A high-stakes conversation isn't simply a difficult conversation. It's an interaction in which we feel something important is at stake and where we place ourselves in a vulnerable position. These exchanges, by their very nature, are often emotionally charged and revolve around sensitive topics such as money, health, family relationships, personal conflicts, or crucial career decisions. Several factors contribute to the intensity of these conversations. 1.1 Intense emotions. It's common for emotions to cloud judgment in these contexts. Feelings such as fear, frustration, anxiety, or irritation can emerge in both us and the other person. If not managed properly, these feelings can dominate the conversation, leading it toward conflict or stagnation. 1.2 High voltage. The pressure to achieve a specific outcome, or the sensitive nature of the issue, increases tension. This can hinder rational thinking and lead to impulsive responses that, far from providing solutions, actually worsen the situation. 1.3 Fear of consequences. Fear of potential repercussions, whether emotional, financial, or professional, can lead us to avoid the conversation or postpone it indefinitely, hoping it will resolve itself. But generally, this avoidance only prolongs the problem. 2. Strategies to stay calm. In any delicate conversation, calmness is our best ally. Losing your temper is like handing over the helm in the middle of a storm. Here are some effective strategies for maintaining emotional control. 2.1 Deep breathing and conscious pauses. Controlling your breathing is a powerful tool for calming your body and mind. A simple exercise involves inhaling deeply for 4 seconds, holding it for 4 seconds, and then exhaling slowly for another 4 seconds. This practice helps reduce tension and regain focus. Taking a conscious pause before responding also provides the necessary time to organize your thoughts. 2.2 Focus on the problem, not the person. One of the most common traps is personalizing the conflict. It's easy to fall into the temptation of attacking the person in front of us when emotions are taking over. However, it's more effective to direct our energy toward resolving the problem rather than blaming the other person. Asking ourselves, what is the real core of this problem? How can we work together to resolve it? Can make all the difference. 2.3 Silence as a tool. Silence, when used well, can be more powerful than 1,000 words. It gives us a moment to reflect and prevents impulsive responses. It also allows the other person to process what has been said. Far from being an uncomfortable void, silence can be a bridge to introspection and empathy. 3. Communication techniques to manage stress. Good communication is the foundation of any fruitful conversation. Here are 3 key techniques to reduce the possibility of emotions getting out of hand. 3.1 Emotional validation. Validating another person's emotions doesn't necessarily mean agreeing, but rather showing understanding. Saying things like, I understand this has caused you frustration, or I can see why you feel this way, can diffuse the discomfort and open the door to constructive dialogue. 3.2 Rethinking the approach. Instead of viewing the conversation as a battle to be right, it's more helpful to frame it as an opportunity to find solutions. For example, if someone is upset about a broken promise, instead of immediately justifying themselves, we can say, I'm sorry this was a problem. I'd like to work together to find a solution that works for both of us. 3.3 Open body language. The body also speaks volumes. A relaxed posture, with no crossed arms and a serene facial expression, conveys readiness and openness. Leaning slightly forward and maintaining eye contact can indicate attention and engagement. On the other hand, tense or defensive gestures tend to increase emotional distance. 4. The art of listening. In times of tension, the temptation to talk more than necessary is strong. However, in high-stakes conversations, active listening is perhaps the most valuable tool. It allows us to better understand the other party, reduce misunderstandings, and move closer to a resolution. 4.1 Listen without judging. Listening without judgment means accepting what the other person is feeling, even if we don't agree. Instead of responding with phrases like, "It's not that big a deal," or "You're overreacting," a more productive alternative would be, I understand this has affected you. What could we do to improve the situation? Section 7. In the previous sections, we have explored the essential pillars of effective communication, breaking down barriers, listening with empathy, building trust, and persuading with a strong ethic. However, reaching a truly advanced level in the art of communication is not an instant achievement. Quite the contrary, it is a skill that, like many others in life, requires ongoing dedication, a constant willingness to learn, and above all, the ability to adapt to change. Communication isn't a skill you learn once and then put away in a drawer. The world we live in changes every day, and with it, the ways we interact, connect, influence others, and resolve misunderstandings evolve as well. The tools we consider effective today could be obsolete tomorrow if we don't maintain an open attitude toward continuous improvement. Therefore, it's essential to adopt a growth mindset, one where learning is endless, and where constant improvement becomes a natural part of both our personal and professional lives. 1. The constant evolution of communication. We are immersed in an era of rapid change. Technology, social dynamics, and work environments are transforming at an unprecedented speed. For example, the rise of social media and digital platforms has revolutionized the way we interact. What was considered effective in a face-to-face conversation or formal meeting a decade ago may now be insufficient or even inappropriate in a global and digital context. In addition, social norms and cultural expectations have also changed. What was once considered respectful expression can now be interpreted very differently. Cultural diversity, sensitivity toward inclusive language, and the presence of new generations with different ways of communicating are just some of the factors influencing this changing landscape. So how can we stay current and effective? The key lies in adaptability and constant reflection. Good communication practices must be frequently evaluated and adjusted. It's not enough to communicate well once, you have to know how to do it constantly and in different contexts. 2. The importance of constant self-assessment. Reflection is an essential ingredient for developing any skill, and communication is no exception. Evaluating how we communicate doesn't mean being harsh on ourselves, but rather practicing honest observation that allows us to identify what we did well and where we could improve. 2.1 Post-conversation analysis. After a meaningful interaction, whether at work, with friends, or family, it's valuable to take a moment to review. Ask yourself, was I able to express my ideas clearly? Did I listen attentively and validate the other person's emotions? Were there times when I was impulsive? How did my body language and tone of voice influence the conversation? What did I learn from that experience and what could I do differently next time? These questions, though simple, open the door to a deeper understanding of our communication patterns. They allow us to identify both our strengths and the areas that need work, and bring us step by step closer to more authentic and effective communication. 2.2 Request feedback. In addition to self-assessment, it's also extremely useful to receive feedback from others. Asking colleagues, friends, or family members how they perceive our communication style can offer us insights we might not have noticed because we're so immersed in our own experiences. External feedback not only allows us to see blind spots, but also gives us the opportunity to adjust our approach to be more clear, empathetic, and effective when interacting with others. 3. Intentional practice to improve. Like any other skill, communication requires constant practice. The difference between someone who communicates naturally and effectively and someone who still struggles to be understood lies in deliberate and conscious practice. 3.1 Learn new communication skills. If you want to improve your ability to influence, resolve differences, or connect emotionally with others, you need to incorporate new tools into your repertoire. Participating in workshops, reading specialized books, observing good communicators, and practicing with trusted people are effective ways to evolve. For example, if you discover you need to develop greater empathy, you can commit to practicing active listening and emotional validation in your daily conversations. As these practices are intentionally repeated, they will become a natural part of your communication style. 3.2 The power of simulations and role-playing. Another powerful technique for improving our communication skills is scenario simulation. Rehearsing important conversations with a friend or colleague, as if it were a play, can prepare you mentally and emotionally for real-life, high-impact moments, such as an interview or a crucial meeting. Repeating these situations trains our minds to respond calmly and clearly, even under pressure. 3.3 Adaptation to the context. There's no single way to communicate that works in all situations. Context is crucial. What's appropriate in a professional setting may seem distant or rigid in a personal conversation. Therefore, it's important to develop sensitivity to read our surroundings and adjust our language, tone, and communication style accordingly. 4. The impact of technology on communication. Technology has profoundly transformed the way we interact. Today, many of our conversations take place through screens, keyboards, and apps. And while these media offer great advantages, they also present unique challenges. 4.1 Effective digital communication. In written messages, it's easy for nuances, emotions, or intentions to get lost. We don't have body language or tone of voice to complement what we say. Therefore, it's essential to learn to be clear, concise, and empathetic in our messages. Adding emojis, expressing our emotions in writing, or paying attention to punctuation can help the message be understood the way we intended. But beyond that, it's essential that every word be imbued with respect and consideration. Likewise, on social media, where interactions can quickly escalate into misunderstandings, it becomes even more important to apply principles of clarity, empathy, and responsibility when communicating. 4.2 Digital body language. Even though we can't see each other physically, there are elements that perform similar functions to body language in the digital environment. Emojis, reactions, GIFs, and even the use of capital letters and exclamation points are ways of conveying emotions, nuances, or intentions. Using them consciously can enrich our communication and prevent our messages from seeming cold or ambiguous. 5. Intercultural communication, an essential skill for the future. In an increasingly globalized world, knowing how to communicate with people from different cultures is no longer an option, but a necessity. Cultural differences can influence how words, gestures, personal space, and even silences are interpreted. 5.1 Cultural sensitivity. Being a good communicator not only involves expressing yourself well within your own culture, but also having the sensitivity and openness to understand other ways of seeing and experiencing the world. What may be considered polite in one place may be inappropriate in another. Learning about other cultures, asking questions respectfully, and being willing to adjust our approach are fundamental steps to avoiding misunderstandings and building bridges instead of barriers. 5.2 Adapt the message to the audience. In intercultural contexts, tailoring the message is key. Sometimes it's helpful to simplify the language, avoid local references that may not be understood, or use more universal examples. All this is done with the goal of making the message clear and accessible, without losing depth. 6. Emotional intelligence in communication. One of the most powerful components of effective communication is emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions and those of others. 6.1 Self-control and self-regulation. Emotional self-control is essential to avoid impulsive reactions that can damage a conversation. Learning to breathe, pause before responding, and distance ourselves emotionally in tense situations allows us to communicate more clearly, without hurting others or being misunderstood. Practicing self-regulation not only improves our relationships but also strengthens our leadership, empathy, and interpersonal trust. In the contemporary era, technology has revolutionized the way we interact with others. Face-to-face conversations, which for centuries were the cornerstone of human communication, have in many cases been replaced by text messages, emails, video calls, and social media posts. Digital communication has become an essential component of both personal and professional life. However, this new communication environment doesn't follow the same rules as face-to-face conversations. The absence of nonverbal cues, the anonymity that technology can provide, and the immediacy with which messages are sent are just some of the differences we must take into account. To become effective communicators in this digital age, it's necessary to learn to use technological tools strategically, maximizing the positive impact of our messages, minimizing misunderstandings, and, above all, fostering authentic and meaningful relationships. Differences between face-to-face and digital communication. One of the most notable contrasts between face-to-face and digital communication is the lack of nonverbal cues. In a face-to-face meeting, we rely on a wealth of elements such as facial expressions, body posture, tone of voice, and other nuances that enrich the message and facilitate its interpretation. However, in digital communication, many of these indicators are lost, which can lead to confusion or misinterpretation if care is not taken in the way messages are worded. Another common challenge is speed. Digital conversations can happen in real time and very quickly, which can lead to rushed responses, with a greater risk of errors or ambiguities. Furthermore, technology can create a sense of emotional distance or even anonymity, which can lead some people to communicate more directly or recklessly than in a physical encounter. Despite these limitations, digital communication also offers considerable advantages. It allows you to maintain contact with people anywhere in the world, facilitates remote and flexible working, and offers the ability to keep a written record of interactions. The importance of writing clearly in a digital world. Since we can't rely on body language or voice intonation in digital environments, it's essential that our words be clear and precise. Effective writing requires not only a good command of the language, but also the ability to structure the message in a comprehensible and accessible way. Clarity above all, whether in an email, a text message, or a social media post, your message should be clear and direct. Using complicated or overly long sentences can make it difficult to understand. Ideally, use simple language, avoiding unnecessary technical terms or jargon that not everyone will understand. Tips for effective writing. Be direct, avoid beating around the bush, make the purpose of your message clear from the start. Use short paragraphs. Large blocks of text can be overwhelming. It's preferable to break the information into smaller sections. Avoid technicalities unless strictly necessary. Try to use language that is accessible to your audience. Use headings and lists. If the content is long, organizing it with headings and numbered or bulleted lists improves comprehension and makes it easier to read. Tone in written communication. One of the most complex aspects to master in digital communication is tone. Without elements like intonation and gestures, the same message can be interpreted in multiple ways depending on the context and the recipient's sensitivity. What may seem friendly and professional to one person may seem cold or even ironic to another. To avoid misunderstandings, it's essential to be intentional about the tone we want to convey. Before sending a message, we should ask ourselves how we want it to be perceived: friendly, formal, close. Using positive words and careful writing help establish the right tone. Recommendations for taking care of your tone. Use appropriate punctuation marks. The way we punctuate can completely change the interpretation of a message. Be respectful, and cordial words like please, thank you, or gladly create a more friendly atmosphere. Avoid excessive capital letters in digital environments. Writing in all caps can be interpreted as shouting. Use them sparingly and only when necessary. Nonverbal communication in the digital environment. Although body language isn't traditionally present in digital media, there are creative ways to add emotional nuances to our messages. The appropriate use of tone, as well as the inclusion of visual elements, can enrich the interaction. Emojis and symbols. Emojis, GIFs, and other graphic symbols are useful tools for expressing emotions or intentions. A smiley face can soften a message, while a sad face can indicate empathy or concern. However, their use should be moderate and appropriate to the context. In formal settings, such as work emails, it may be best to avoid them, while in informal conversations they add closeness and warmth. The format also communicates. The visual design of a message contributes to its clarity. Using bold, italics, or underlining to highlight key points and organizing ideas through lists improves comprehension. Furthermore, good use of white space, margins, and legible typography facilitates reading and creates a more enjoyable experience for the recipient. Real-time conversations, video calls and instant messaging. With the expansion of video calls and instant messaging, real-time communication has become more important than ever. However, each digital platform has its own dynamics and requires specific skills. Video calls. This format offers an experience closer to in-person interaction, although it also presents challenges. For example, body language is still important, but it may be limited by the camera frame. It's advisable to look directly into the camera to simulate eye contact and maintain an open and attentive posture. Tips for an effective video call. Make sure your equipment is working properly before you begin. Choose an appropriate environment free from distractions. Avoid interrupting, listen carefully and wait your turn to speak. Be expressive with your face and stay focused during the conversation. Instant messaging. Platforms like WhatsApp, Slack, and Telegram have profoundly changed the way we communicate. While they offer immediacy, this can lead to impulsive responses or misinterpretations due to a lack of context. Recommendations for effective messaging. Be clear and brief. Don't assume interpretations. If there are doubts, ask for clarification. Avoid an ambiguous tone, which can seem disinterested or dry. Social networks, content and privacy management. Social media has redefined public and private communication, and with it, new challenges surrounding personal image and privacy have emerged. Be aware of what we share. Everything we post on social media has a much greater visibility than we sometimes imagine. Our messages, images, or comments can be seen by people outside our immediate circle and sometimes remain online for a long time. Tips for responsible use of social media. Maintain a consistent image between your personal and professional life. Think before you post. Remember that once posted, it can be difficult to retract. Respect other people's privacy. Before tagging someone or sharing anything involving them, make sure you have their consent. Digital empathy. The dizzying pace of social media and the relative distance they allow can encourage impulsive responses. Practicing digital empathy is essential. Responding respectfully, even in the face of disagreements, helps build healthier communities and contributes to more harmonious coexistence in the virtual environment. For many people, public speaking represents one of the greatest challenges they may face. The mere thought of standing in front of an audience, large or small, and having to convey an important message can trigger nerves, insecurity, and even anxiety. However, this skill, when mastered, becomes one of the most powerful tools a communicator can possess. The art of public speaking isn't just about having a good stage presence. It goes much further. It's about crafting a solid and persuasive message, moving and mobilizing those who listen, and, above all, creating an impact that lasts beyond the moment the words are spoken. This chapter explores how to develop and refine the essential skills for speaking effectively before large audiences, whether at a conference, a business meeting, or an academic setting. From meticulous preparation to managing nervousness and tailoring your message to your audience's interests, you'll learn how to become a speaker who not only communicates, but transforms. 1. The psychology behind public speaking, understanding the audience. Before learning how to speak in front of others, it's crucial to understand who you're addressing. The key to effective communication is connecting with your audience's emotions, expectations, and needs. A good speaker knows that delivering a clear message isn't enough. They must make people feel like the message was created specifically for them. 1.1 Identify what the audience needs. The first step to establishing a real connection is to research what your audience is looking for. Are they hoping for concrete information? Are they looking for motivation, inspiration, or simply entertainment? Knowing the answers to these questions will allow you to shape your pitch so that it resonates deeply with their interests. For example, if you're speaking at a professional convention, your audience will most likely value practical ideas applicable to their work environment. On the other hand, if it's a motivational talk, the focus will be on generating emotions that lead to personal transformation. 1.2 Emotion as a communication bridge. Human decisions are rarely made completely rationally. Although we like to think we're logical, our emotions actually play a leading role. Therefore, a good speech must go beyond facts and arguments. It must move people. By using stories, emotional language, and an empathetic attitude, you can ensure that your audience not only understands your message, but also experiences it with you. Emotions are the driving force that moves people, and therefore, they should be the soul of your communication. 2. Preparation, the foundation of success. A memorable speech doesn't emerge from improvisation. Thorough preparation is the foundation of every good message. If you want to influence others, you need to spend time understanding your content, structuring your presentation, and rehearsing each section until you feel comfortable. 2.1 Master your subject. When you know your content inside and out, you speak confidently, fluently, and credibly. You don't need to be an absolute expert, but you do need to have a deep understanding and be ready to answer questions. This confidence is perceived and generates respect. On the other hand, poor preparation is easily detected and can lead to disinterest or distrust on the part of your audience. 2.2 Structure the message clearly. A well-structured message will always be more effective than a haphazard set of ideas. Most people retain information better when it is presented logically and clearly. The basic structure of a good speech includes: Introduction. It should immediately grab attention. You can start with an anecdote, a provocative question, or a shocking fact. Development. Key ideas are presented here in an organized manner. There's no need to overwhelm with too many points, 3 or 4 are sufficient. Conclusion. It should be memorable. Summarize the most important points and end with a call to action or a powerful reflection. 2.3 Constant rehearsal and practice. Practicing your presentation several times before the actual event will allow you to perfect your intonation, timing, and body language. You can rehearse in front of a mirror or record yourself to identify areas for improvement. Even doing a rehearsal with a small, trusted group can help you receive feedback and gain confidence before the main event. 3. Overcome stage fright. The fear of public speaking is very common. Many people fear making mistakes, not being understood, or simply feeling vulnerable in the eyes of others. But this fear can be managed with appropriate strategies. 3.1 Recognize and accept nerves. Feeling nervous before speaking is completely normal. Even great speakers experience it. The important thing is not to fight that emotion, but rather to accept it as a natural sign of readiness. That energy can be transformed into enthusiasm and help you shine. 3.2 Conscious breathing. When we're nervous, our breathing tends to accelerate, which increases anxiety. Breathing deeply and slowly helps calm the mind and maintain control. A simple exercise is to inhale for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, and exhale slowly for another 4 seconds. Repeat several times before going on stage. 3.3 Positive visualization. Imagine your presentation is a success. Visualize yourself speaking with confidence, seeing smiles, nods, and genuine attention from the audience. This mental technique, used by many public speakers and athletes, can help reduce anxiety and boost your self-esteem. 4. The voice, impact tool. Your voice is a powerful instrument. It's not just about what you say, but how you say it. Pitch, rhythm, volume, and intonation can make your words resonate deeply or go unnoticed. 4.1 Vary rhythm and intonation. A monotonous voice can make the most valuable message lose its power. On the other hand, changing the pace or tone at key moments maintains attention and reinforces the impact. Speeding up the delivery can generate enthusiasm, while slowing down the speech at critical points allows the message to sink in better. 4.2 Strategic breaks. Well-placed pauses not only emphasize an idea, but also give the listener a moment to reflect. They also help you breathe, organize your thoughts, and pace your speech elegantly. 5. Interaction with the audience. One of the most complex tasks when speaking in public is maintaining the audience's attention from beginning to end. These days, distractions are constant, so it's essential to implement effective strategies to keep your audience engaged. 5.1 Engaging the public. Ask questions, invite reflection, or allow for small contributions. Including simple dynamics or moments of interaction transforms a passive presentation into a shared and active experience. 5.2 The power of stories. Telling relevant stories turns a speech into a memorable experience. People feel more connected to personal or emotional stories than to cold facts. Stories spark empathy, curiosity, and attention. 5.3 Visual aids. Visual presentations, such as slides, charts, or videos, can reinforce your ideas. However, they should be used sparingly. The focus should remain on your message, not the visuals. Use them to complement, not replace, your presence. Communication has the transformative power to alter destinies, inspire momentous decisions, mobilize entire communities, and reshape organizations from their foundations. However, the true scope of its influence is not limited to the mere exchange of words or the fleeting impact of a casual conversation. Its essence lies in its ability to germinate lasting changes in human worldview, feelings, and actions. This analysis explores how to use communication tools to cultivate profound transformations, whether in the personal, professional, or social spheres. Authentic influence not only pursues immediate results but sows the seeds of sustainable evolution, requiring deliberate interactions grounded in authenticity, unwavering purpose, and genuine commitment. The first pillar of this communication architecture lies in connecting to transform. Before aspiring to lasting change, it is imperative to define the ultimate reason for each message. Communication should never be reduced to an automatic mechanism for exchanging information or superficial persuasive strategies. Its highest version is born from crystalline purposes, from that deliberate intention to leave a significant mark on the human fabric. Each statement must align with this internal compass. When communication is oriented toward positive transformation, interlocutors perceive that sincerity imprinted in every syllable. A leader who conveys his vision for transcendent causes or crucial organizational objectives achieves more authentic connections when his discourse reflects collective commitment and not disguised personal agendas. Clarity of purpose becomes a fundamental ally. A clear purpose allows for the selection of precise words, revealing stories, and illuminating examples that lead to deep reflection and committed action. But the true miracle occurs when that individual purpose is transformed into a collective cause. People embrace change with greater fervor when they see their role within a broader context, when they understand how their individual actions contribute to a greater good. Building this shared sense requires articulating purpose through stories that illustrate concrete impact, tangible examples that resonate with the intrinsic motivations of each participant. In this transformative journey, clarity and simplicity emerge as indispensable beacons. In our era of information overload and fragmented attention, complex messages are diluted in the background noise. True mastery lies in distilling complex ideas without sacrificing their depth, eliminating rhetorical harshness to reveal the pure essence of the message. This strategic simplification is crucial in organizational or community contexts, where misunderstanding can become an insurmountable barrier to change. A leader presenting a new corporate vision must do so in accessible language, free of unnecessary technical jargon, allowing every member of the organization to naturally embrace the message. The power of ritualistic repetition should not be underestimated. Transformative ideas require reiteration through multiple channels and formats: informal conversations, written communications, formal meetings, until they become part of the collective cognitive fabric. This consistency does not seek mere memorization, but rather a deep internalization that builds credibility and trust, essential foundations for any lasting change. But intellect alone is not enough. Emotions constitute the true driving force of human action. Transformational communication must transcend the rational to resonate in the most sensitive fibers of the being. This emotional connection demands radical authenticity, honest vulnerability, personal experiences shared without filters, convictions expressed with human warmth. Stories, that universal language of experience, emerge as privileged tools for this purpose, far surpassing the impact of cold data or impersonal statistics. A well-constructed narrative about how change affected specific lives can move mountains where logical arguments only scratch the surface. In this emotional realm, empathy reigns supreme. Genuinely understanding the audience's fears, hopes, and resistances allows for the design of messages that will resonate in their hearts. In organizational change processes, openly acknowledging potential difficulties can allay anxieties and create spaces for voluntary adherence, which is much more effective than top-down imposition. However, even the most emotive and clear message is useless if it doesn't lead to concrete action. Mobilizing sometimes requires creating a sense of urgency, not through paralyzing fear, but by highlighting tangible opportunities or avoidable consequences. Environmental sustainability offers the perfect paradigm. Emphasizing how present actions can shape a better future is often more motivating than apocalyptic catastrophizing. But urgency must be accompanied by accessible resources, training, practical guides, support networks. People need to feel supported every step of the way, reassured that change, although challenging, is possible and worthwhile.